So I'm going to go over how I filled out these questions so that you can do it on the remainder of these. So the first one asked me to compare their latitude and climate zone. So if I look at their latitude, this one is 13 degrees north of the equator. This is 59 degrees north of the equator. So remember, it goes up, right, to 90 degrees would be the North Pole. So that's pretty high up there. And this one is pretty close to the equator. So this one is tropical, close to the equator. This is in the polar zone and close to the North Pole. So then it asked me to compare their elevation. So this one is 5, so it's barely above sea level, so practically right at the ocean level. And this is only 544. So while it may sound like a big difference, really, right, 500 feet, I can see that distance. It's not that far. So it's like, right, it's a tiny bit higher, but probably not enough to really make a big difference in their climates. So their ocean currents, right? So Thailand has these blue, cold ones coming back up, back to the equator. And also then from the equator, it has these hot currents that have heated up at the equator. But even though this one is cold, coming back from lower, it's still going to be pretty warm because it was around the equator. It never really got too far down. So where this one is coming straight from the poles, that only has that cold water from the poles. That's really going to make that colder there. So then it asks the proximity to water. So are they close to water? Are they surrounded by land? So are they inland or are they on the coast? So looking here at, zoom in just a tiny bit. So here is Bangkok and I can see, right, there's ocean pretty much all around it. St. Petersburg, this is ocean up here. They're both very close to the water. So I would say they are kind of coastal cities and not surrounded by land, not inland. So then it asked me what is one main difference between the temperatures in these cities. So up here, so our red line is the average high and here's our average low. And so I can see, right, so this was pretty consistent. It's just pretty much staying that same temperature all year round. It's not changing. It's getting that same amount of sunlight. Where in Russia, it depends, is the pole, right? Because it's up high. Is it facing toward the sun? So here's at summer, it's facing toward the sun, or is it facing away from the sun during winter? So that's definitely going to have those highs and lows because of its latitude, because it's so much higher up. So one main difference between the temperatures, I wrote that Thailand is warmer and more temperate, right? It just kind of stays even than St. Petersburg. So what are some reasons for these differences? So I think the biggest difference, so lots of these answers were very similar to each other. So I think the biggest difference is that latitude and that climate zone they're just already in. So because Thailand is very close to the equator, it's getting that direct sunlight all year long. So even as the earth, right, is tilted, even as it goes around, Thailand is still just right there in the middle where St. Petersburg is going to be up higher. And so sometimes during the year, it'll be tilted toward the sun and other times it will be tilted away from the sun. So I think that is the biggest difference. And even, right, you can see its high never gets as high as Thailand does because it's so much farther north compared to Thailand. I think I just said Thailand twice. I meant St. Petersburg does not get as warm as Thailand because you can see, right, it's just so much farther north. It's just really affecting that into that polar climate zone there. So that is what you're going to do on the rest of these. So each one, just go through, kind of just type a little comparison statement. How do each of these compare? And then answer the 2 questions. The 2 questions will be different on every single one depending on what the cities are. So these first 4 are the same, the things you should check for. And then here is the rest. Oh, and don't forget this blue is the precipitation. So you can see, right, Thailand's going to get a lot of precipitation just because it's so much warmer. Warm causes evaporation. So there's going to be a lot of evaporation there, which causes that precipitation. So even though it's warm, there's still a lot of rain there. Where this is going to be more snow. It still gets a lot of rain, but also those colder temperatures will be snow. So we've got hot and cold, blue and red, our precipitation. These colored bands are going to be your climate zones. Your latitude is down here. Your elevation, so the higher up, the higher away from sea level you are, the less air is pushing down on you, causing you to feel colder. And then we've got our ocean currents, right? Those red ones are going, they were at the equator, warmed up, and they go to the poles. And then they come back as they're cold to the equator. So you can look and see where each of the currents are and how they affect those different places.